Tonight, the loss of a powerful and legendary champion for justice and women's rights.
Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away at the age of 87.
Breaking news tonight with this tremendous loss for our country. Good evening to you. I'm Carolyn Clifford.
And I'm Dave Llewellyn. We thank you for joining us. The powerhouse Supreme Court Justice died this evening surrounded by her family at her home in Washington, D.C. after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. A live look outside the U.S. Supreme Court where people are gathering, leaving flowers, honoring her legacy.
And tonight we have Team 7 coverage beginning with Karen Travers in Washington, D.C. tonight with Ginsburg's amazing accomplishments.
She was just the second woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg's true legacy may be as the legal architect of the equal rights movement. She graduated at the top of her class at Columbia Law School. Her career began in the 1950s when sexual and racial discrimination was a fact of life.
Not a law firm in the entire city of New York bid for my employment as a lawyer.
Eventually, she was hired by the American Civil Liberties Union. There, she would help lead a movement that changed the nation, challenging laws that treated men and women differently in employment, housing, and government benefits. She was appointed to the High Court by President Clinton in 1993.
In her pioneering work in behalf of the women of this country, she has compiled a truly historic record of achievement.
As a Supreme Court justice, she was best known for the far-reaching decision that struck down the Virginia Military Institute's men-only admission policy.
Those doors that were shut tight against us are now open. So, long term, I remain optimistic.
Justice Ginsburg was known as a judicial workhorse. She worked throughout her treatment for cancer in 1999 and again 10 years later. In January 2019, her recovery from surgery to remove cancerous lesions from her lung forced her to miss oral arguments, but she continued working from home. Ginsburg became something of a pop culture icon late in her life. This comedic but still reverent impression of her on Saturday Night Live.
I'm never gonna step down now, you can't get rid of me!
A documentary titled RBG, after a nickname given to her by fans, and the 2018 film On the Basis of Sex, focusing on her push for equal rights. On social issues like civil rights, abortion, and separation of church and state, she was a consistent liberal, yet she won the admiration of many conservatives for her grasp of the law and carefully considered opinions. Karen Travers, ABC News, Washington.
Just an amazing legacy. Our Team 7 coverage on the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg continues now.
7 Action News reporter Alan Campbell just spoke with a former law clerk of Ginsburg's. Alan?
Ellie Saffett is now the top attorney for Mayor Mike Duggan and the city of Detroit. But earlier on in his career, he was a law clerk for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He says she was a staple on the U.S. Supreme Court, an icon for gender equality, and just an overall great person.
I clerked for her during the 2014-2015 Supreme Court term. Their year-long gigs, and really was one of the highlights of my life and my career.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 87. She was a constant on the Supreme Court and a strong advocate for women's rights. Those who worked closely with her, like Ellie Saffett, say she was a true leader.
You sort of stood in awe of her as somebody that was working for her and working with her. She was just unlike any other person that I've ever met in my life.
Ginsburg was the second woman to sit on the High Court and is the longest-serving woman in history. Saffett says she took her job seriously, making sure everything was done with meticulous and accurate precision.
When she spoke, and she spoke in a quiet and deliberate manner, but every single word had force. She thought about every single word that came out of her mouth or that she put down on paper.
Ginsburg was someone for the people who cared deeply about equality for all. Saffett says Ginsburg was more than just a justice on the Supreme Court. She was a legend, a hero, and someone that generations looked up to.
But at the end of the day, she treated everybody with dignity and with grace and with kindness and with love. And I just cherish every moment that I spent with her.
And tonight, Ellie tells me that the world lost a great person, someone who always put people first and would always fight for everyone. He also tells me that there will never be another Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Reporting live tonight, I'm Alan Campbell. Carolyn, back to you.
Just amazing to hear so many stories about this wonderful woman. Thank you so much, Alan, for sharing. Dave.
And more stories to come. We turn now to Dave Moran, clinical professor of law, who has argued cases in front of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the Supreme Court. Dave is with the Michigan Innocence Clinic at the University of Michigan now. Dave, we thank you for joining us. I understand you argued 6 cases in front of the Supreme Court, and that gives you some unique perspective, certainly, of Justice Ginsburg. What was your impression of this legendary justice?
She was always very well prepared for argument. She asked very probing, incisive questions, and she asked them in the nicest possible way. I won some of my cases that I argued in front of her and lost her vote in other cases. But either way, you couldn't tell where she was going necessarily from the questions, because she would ask hard questions of both sides, trying to get to the nub of the issue. But she always did it in a way that was very respectful of the advocates in front of her. She was one of the few justices who had argued cases before the court herself. As mentioned already in the reporting, she was an advocate in the 1970s and argued several landmark cases on women's rights before the court. And she really helped pave the way as an advocate. And so I think she really understood what it was like to stand in that well of that court and take these questions. And so she did not want to make the experience uncomfortable or too taxing for the lawyers in front of her, but she sure asked great questions.
This loss, it's significant, it's hugely impactful, isn't it?
It is. She was one of the great minds to serve on the court in my lifetime, and it's really hard to imagine how she would be replaced. She really helped move the court gently in progressive directions, because she was able to persuade other members of the court sometimes who wouldn't necessarily be inclined to agree with her on everything to come along with her on this issue or that issue.
Yeah. We appreciate you adding your thoughts and insights, Professor Moran. Thank you, and we all mourn her loss, certainly this evening.
Yeah, it's a great loss for the nation.
Thank you, sir. Carolyn?
All right, Dave, the late Justice Ginsburg meant so much to women. Inspired by her tenacious spirit, we reached out to the president and CEO of the Women's Law Center in Washington, D.C., Fatima Goss Graves, who grew up in Michigan. Like Ginsburg, Graves has spent much of her career fighting for issues critical to women and studying Ginsburg's rulings. Last summer, she was at an event focused on her legacy and feels fortunate to have met her.
The thing that will stay with me is how precise she was, how clear she was, and how committed she was to justice. I mean, Justice Ginsburg, for those of us who have come up in the work of gender justice and who have really spent some time looking at her opinions, she broke the ground.
Did indeed. Graves says many hearts are heavy tonight knowing the world has lost a titan of justice.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell vowed whomever President Trump nominates to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat will get a vote by the full Senate. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate, said the vacancy should not be filled until there's a new president. Senate Republicans only need 51 votes to confirm a new justice once one is formally nominated.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer has just ordered flags to be lowered in Michigan to honor Justice Ginsburg. Stay with 7 Action News on air and online for continuing coverage of the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. For more on her life and her legacy, head on over to WXYZ.com.